My name is Stephanie Rogers, and today I am speaking with Dan Wiemer, who is a local Red Wing resident and painter, as we continue this series of artist studio visits as part of the artistic response team of Red Wing. So Dan, could you please introduce yourself and tell audiences a little bit about your process?
Yeah, my name is Dan Wiemer, and like Stephanie said, I live in Red Wing here, and I've been painting for a long time. I really got my start with watercolor, and I painted exclusively in watercolor for about 20 years. And then I began to combine acrylic and watercolor and create a kind of a more of a graphic printmaker-like style. And so what I do oftentimes is I love the process of printmaking, of woodblock art and batik. And the thing that appeals to me about those two is negative shapes are being created. And so I wanted to paint like a woodcut artist. And so what I would do is I would surround my shadow shapes with masking fluid. I would paint the shadow shapes in acrylic. I would take the masking fluid off, and then I would paint watercolor over the top. And it really created a kind of a unique graphic style that has kind of become my own.
You definitely have a signature style. I can tell when I see one of your pieces. I don't have to look at the signature to know that it's a Dan Wiemer piece.
Yeah, that's a compliment. Thank you.
Thanks so much for giving us some insight into how you make those images.
Yeah.
How did you get started as an artist? Is this something you've been doing since you were a kid?
Yeah, it was funny. When I was a third grader, I knew I wanted to be an artist, and I was able to draw in class, and I got attention, and it was interesting how just doing something that fed the attention, I wanted to do more of it. And my father was a landscape architect, and so he was always drawing park plans and bike path plans and stuff, and he would let me help him color in some of the plans. So at a real early age, I knew I wanted to be an artist. I went and got a graphic design degree at Iowa State and down in Ames. And then when I got out, got married, and my wife and we moved to Minneapolis, and I was worked at an ad agency. So I started commercially first, and I literally am the last of the old school artists because we came out with no computer skills. And so that's been an interesting thing that I've kind of run from the computer a little bit my whole life. I say that because I used to be a graphic designer, and then I transitioned into an illustrator, and then I transitioned from an illustrator into just a painter, a fine artist. So it's been interesting. If I would have had to do it all over again, I don't think I would have done anything different because the design foundation was really important.
Well, that's always a good sign when you can make that statement that you wouldn't change anything. Was there a point, or has there been a point in your career where you felt like you made it or reached a major goal that you were aiming for?
It seemed when I was younger and I got to a certain level, it felt like I had made it. Like I'd become the artist that I wanted to be. But the older I get, I think if you think you've made it, you can kind of become complacent and you kind of lose your curiosity. So at one time in my past, I felt like I made it, and now I don't think that I've made it in a good way. I think that I was searching for an identity in my style, and I had an illustration professor in school said, if you want to be known, you have to have a distinctive style. And I think it took a long time to arrive at that. And I think once I finally started to get a style that was kind of uniquely mine and that I could design within, that was kind of a benchmark where I felt like I had made it when I kind of found my look, so to speak.
It's a good way to think about it. Career benchmarks along the journey rather than an arrival point.
Yeah, I think so. And And I think that the more you work, you exhaust the obvious. And if you can keep doing iterations and iterations, you start to challenge yourself a little bit more, and you start to come up with something that's a little bit more honest and unique than staying in the same spot. So I like that. I like doing a subject enough times, painting a subject enough times that you really get to explore and find new things. So
I like the word curiosity that you used earlier. So I have to ask, where is your artistic curiosity taking you next? What are you working on now?
currently I have to do a show. I'm going to be in a 3-person show at the Minnesota Arboretum. So trees, the pictures have to be about trees. And I really enjoy painting trees. I would rather do a portrait of a tree than a portrait of a person. So my immediate future, I am going to paint a lot of trees and really explore the options and the design and really get interested. But you know, if I were to have a choice of painting something for the rest of my life, it would probably be the North Shore of Lake Superior or the Boundary Waters or something. I'm continually drawn to that. So trees are in my immediate future, and then after trees, then I'm gonna maybe have trees up north.
Sounds good. And of course, exhibition schedules have been rearranged and thrown out the window everywhere. The Anderson Center included. Our exhibition schedules are shifting and
I know.
haven't settled yet. But do you know when that exhibition will be taking place if people wanted to see your work there?
Yeah, it's going to be from mid-July to mid-September, and you know, I know they are only allowing certain people outside to drive around the ring. I think by that point they'll let small numbers of people inside, but the show has been postponed once. It could be pushed back even more. And it's the great unknown. Everybody's pushing things back in their schedule, and they still don't know if something's gonna go or not.
So out of my curiosity, are you the kind of artist who keeps working on something right up until the deadline when it has to be turned in, or do you feel like you've come to a point where you know something's finished and you're able to totally set it aside and move on?
I can get to a point where I realize that it's almost like this point of diminishing returns, where the more you work on it, the less you're getting out of it. I'm much better at that than I used to be. I think sometimes it's like a teeter-totter. And when you try to go for perfection, you lose expressiveness. And so I think I have kind of an attention deficit disorder anyway. And when I start to just kind of get bored with the picture or start to labor on it a little bit, it's done. It needs to be done. And whether it's perfect or savable or whatever is another point, but I can move on pretty good.
Great.
You know, I'll just jump right in and say, I think that is a challenging part for a working artist. I paint pictures that people will buy, and I really think about painting things that people will want to buy, and that's a big motivation. So I try to think of a circle of what I would like to paint and a circle of what the consumer wants to buy, and where that crossover point is, that's where I want to work. I do occasionally do things just for me, but the bulk of what I do is, as a professional artist, is paint pictures that people will want to buy.
That's a smart business strategy and a smart artistic strategy to look at that overlap in the Venn diagram, so you make sure you're feeding yourself too. I've got to ask, the pictures that you do just for yourself that you don't think people will buy,
Yeah.
What do those look like?
Oh, no. I don't do a whole lot of those. I think they're more non-representational, I think, and I've done stuff for me that people also want to buy. So I do very, very little amount of things for me. I do practice. I practice sketching and painting and doing things like that for the thing. But I'm dancing around your question right here. I'm trying to figure out, to be totally honest, I do not do a whole lot of things just for me. I paint, I paint for me, but I really want to think about what people want. And it has become interesting if I paint a picture of the North Shore and I paint a picture of Ireland, people buy the North Shore. And so I paint another North Shore and they buy the North Shore. So I paint another picture of the North Shore. And a lot of artists paint the same picture over and over and over. And I kind of do that, and hopefully you can vary the theme a little bit.
Has the coronavirus pandemic affected the way you work at all?
Well, besides kind of having a kind of a veil of uneasiness and anxiety and a little bit of depression over everything, I don't think it's affected the way I paint, but it's affected the way I sell, obviously. And that's the biggest thing is part of my job was running things to galleries and getting out and about. And I've painted a lot in my studio because I work at home, whether it's pandemic or no, but I would say, no, my style hasn't changed, but it just puts a kind of a cover on things, just a weird uneasiness. And so hopefully things will start to be opening up here a little bit in June. I don't think there's been any stylistically or anything, there has been really no change, but it is awful when you no longer can have your art fairs and have your galleries open. So there's a sense that you've been kind of, the hose has been kinked and there's no money flowing in and artwork flowing out. So yeah.
You're a pretty social guy too.
I am, and that's important too. And that's another thing that causes a little bit of anxiety. When you work at home and when you work by yourself, you need to get out and get those little social interactions, real life social interactions. Yeah.
Hopefully we'll be back to that soon.
I hope so. Yeah.
Do you have any advice you would give to aspiring artists that might be watching this?
It's a marathon and not a sprint, and you think you're going to magically get to the finish line right away and then you're going to be this successful artist. It's just this, you really have to enjoy the process more than the product, I think. And I know that sounds unfair. I look back, I think of every painting I do is a ring on a tree. And my tree, I'm thousands and thousands of rings in my tree, and it gives me a lot of experience. And I think a lot of young artists, they haven't had many creative experiences yet. You just have to keep learning and being curious and layering those, whether you're a photographer or a painter or a sculptor, you just have to keep making things, because style comes out of tendencies, and you need to learn yourself and you need to learn your tendencies to be able to find your style. And I think that's hard. I remember when I was in college, when I was 20 years old, somebody said, like I said, the teacher said, you have to have a style. I tried to snap my fingers and just try this, try that, try this, try that. And it's like trying to get a personality. You don't get a personality over the weekend. It's a lifelong. So artistic, it's this lifelong thing, and it takes a long time. That's probably not what the young person's going to want to hear, but it's the truth.
It's good perspective, and I love that your favorite subject matter and your life advice both have a tree theme going.
A tree, yeah, the tree theme, absolutely, yeah.
Are there places that people can see your work online or in public right now?
First of all, online is my website, is danwiemer.com, and I have a lot of images there, and you can purchase artwork off of that, and it also talks a little bit about me. Tells how exciting I am and stuff. But I will, starting on this Friday, or a week from this Friday, I'm going to have a show at Seasons on St. Croix. That's in Hudson, Wisconsin. So I'll have about 10 originals in there, and that's a gallery that I've been involved with for about almost 25 years now. And I'm also in the galleries up on the North Shore in Duluth and then in Grand Marais. So as the galleries start to open, it will get better. I'm in about 12 galleries, and I usually do about 12 outdoor art shows in the Midwest. And so that's what's really been difficult. So we'll see how the art fair might be completely canceled this summer, but we'll see.
Are there other things that you specifically think I should ask you about, or people would want to know about your work?
When I started painting watercolor, I was kind of a technician. I wanted to paint what was in front of me and kind of be fairly realistic. And I think I'm in a better place now because I can be a designer and a painter. So I take more risks, and I have a little bit more latitude that I give myself. It took me a long time to realize that every painting I do isn't going to be better than the last one. And I think sometimes artists are too hard on themselves. I think you can take a bad photo and you can do a bad painting, and sometimes you almost beat yourself up. And why aren't I better? But you have to have kind of short-term memory on the failures and long-term memories on the successes. And I think that I started to just kind of move on from a bad piece and then do a good one, and not dwell on the fact that everything, like I said earlier, perfectionism kind of can be a killer. So there's a fine line. And I think you mentioned earlier what I would tell young artists. I would tell them to go and look at experienced artists, award-winning artists, go to museums and try to figure out why those pieces are good. People have opinions. Obviously, there's art critics, and sometimes you don't understand why a piece is considered good and why another piece is not considered good. But I think when you look at competitions and different things, the cream rises. And when I was 22, 23 years old, I was in an illustration group in the Twin Cities and in Chicago with an agent. And the people that got most of the work were people my age now, people from 50 to 70 that had illustrated their whole lives. And I didn't understand why they got the work and why I didn't. And the reason was they were really good and I wasn't. I didn't have the experience, and I almost didn't know how to evaluate my own work. When I look back at the work I did when I was 22, I'm 56 currently. When I look back that far and look at my work, then I'm like, oh my gosh, I was like horrified at how kind of primitive it was. And so I just think, going back to the tree, all these things, all these paintings and all these things that you do, you get more tools in your tool belt. And now I can do a piece and it's much more sophisticated or whatever, because I have so much more of a, so again, telling the young people, it just takes time to start to hone in on your skills.
Great. Well, it's been really fun to talk to you today. I keep looking at that great image of the canoers behind you. And
oh yeah, look at that.
And just really enjoying the angles and the reflections in the water. I can see, as you were talking about earlier, the being able to take more of, some might call an artistic liberty or be more of a designer. I really see that in the water, especially. So
thank you. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to do this. And I'm looking forward to see what you've come up with when you put it together.
Yeah, me too. This has been Stephanie Rogers from the Anderson Center interviewing Dan Wiemer as part of the artistic response team of Red Wing, a collaboration between the Anderson Center, Art Reach, Red Wing Arts, the Sheldon Theater, and Universal Music Center. Thanks for watching.